The night was cold and damp when Amelia inherited the little antique shop that had belonged to her late Aunt Margaret. Margaret had always been a peculiar woman, known for her strange tastes and her obsession with collecting unusual artifacts. The shop, located in a quiet corner of an old town, was filled with everything from rusted lanterns to cracked mirrors. But the most striking part of the inheritance was not the shop itself, but the back room that Margaret had always kept locked. On the day Amelia first turned the key and stepped into that dimly lit chamber, she froze. The shelves were lined from floor to ceiling with dolls, hundreds of them, each with glassy eyes that seemed to follow her every move. Some were porcelain with delicate painted faces, others were ragged cloth figures with stitched mouths, and a few looked so lifelike they gave her chills. Amelia told herself it was just her imagination, but she couldn't ignore the way the air felt heavier in that room, as though all those silent faces were waiting for something. At first, she dismissed the unease as nerves. She cleaned the shop during the day, rearranging shelves and dusting cobwebs, but she avoided the back room as much as she could. At night, though, she could hear things. A faint tapping like tiny feet scurrying across the wooden floor, or soft thuds as if something had fallen, though when she checked, nothing was out of place. The dolls remained perfectly still, their frozen smiles mocking her fear. One night, after closing up, she stayed longer than usual to go over the books. Around midnight, she heard a faint giggle. It was high-pitched, childlike, and it came from the back room. Her heart raced, but curiosity got the better of her. She grabbed a flashlight and went to investigate. The beam of light cut through the darkness, sweeping across rows of dolls. Then she noticed it. One of the dolls was no longer on the shelf where it had been earlier. It was sitting on the floor, legs splayed, head tilted unnaturally to the side. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She picked up the doll and placed it back on the shelf, muttering to herself that it must have fallen, though deep down she knew she would have heard it. When she turned to leave, she caught sight of something else. On the shelf, tucked between two older porcelain dolls, there was a photograph she hadn't seen before. She pulled it out and felt her stomach turn. It was a faded picture of a little girl, maybe 8 years old, smiling at the camera. Her dress was old-fashioned, but what made Amelia's skin crawl was that the girl looked exactly like the porcelain doll sitting right beside the photo. The resemblance was uncanny, down to the ribbons in her hair. The next day, Amelia started going through the other dolls, checking them one by one. To her horror, many of them had photographs tucked behind or underneath them. Children, all different ages and appearances, each one matched with a doll that looked almost identical. She started digging through her aunt's old notes and papers, desperate for an explanation. She found a worn leather journal hidden under the floorboards of Margaret's office. The entries were scattered and erratic, filled with ramblings about souls and vessels. One line in particular made Amelia's blood run cold. "They will stay with me forever. Each doll holds what death tried to take." Over the next week, the disturbances escalated. Lights flickered, the sound of small footsteps echoed in the shop when no one was there, and every morning Amelia found at least one doll in a different place than before. She tried to rationalize it as stress, fatigue, maybe even sleepwalking, but one night proved otherwise. While she was sleeping in the small apartment above the shop, she woke to the sound of something moving in her bedroom. She reached for the lamp, but before she could turn it on, she heard it. The creak of tiny wooden joints, the swish of fabric dragging across the floor. She fumbled for her phone, switched on the flashlight, and nearly screamed. The porcelain doll that looked like the girl from the first photo was standing upright at the foot of her bed. Amelia dropped her phone in panic, and when she picked it up again, the doll was back to lying on the floor, limp and lifeless. Her hands shook as she placed it back in the back room, locking the door this time. But locking it did not help. The next morning, the doll was sitting on the counter in the shop as if waiting for her. She decided then that she couldn't stay in the shop any longer. She packed her things, determined to leave the inheritance behind, but when she reached for the keys to lock up, she found something slipped under the door. It was another photograph, this one of her. She stared at the picture in horror. She was standing behind the counter of the shop, smiling, exactly as she had been earlier that day. But what froze her completely was the small doll cradled in her arms in the picture, a doll she had never seen before. Panic clawed at her chest. She ran to the back room, half against her better judgment, and there it was on the top shelf. A new doll. It looked just like her. Same hair, same eyes, the same little scar above her lip. She staggered back, dropping the journal she still clutched in her hand. Pages fluttered open to one last chilling entry. The collection is almost complete. When I am gone, they will choose their new keeper. Amelia felt an icy presence behind her and turned to see the dolls. All of them, no longer scattered randomly but neatly arranged in rows, their glassy eyes gleaming in the dim light, and every single one of them was smiling. That was the last night Amelia was ever seen. The shop still stands, its windows coated with dust, the sign faded and cracked. But sometimes, when passers-by walk past after dark, they swear they see movement inside, small silhouettes flitting across the room, or the faint reflection of children's faces pressed against the glass. And those who are brave enough to peek inside claim the collection has grown. Among the porcelain and cloth figures sits a new doll, one with striking green eyes and a scar above her lip staring out into the night, as if waiting for the next curious soul to inherit the cursed legacy of the doll collector.